עכשיו התחיל. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. After the success we had with the Hebrew session of questions and answers, some people told me I forgot to translate myself as I was talking. So, the truth of the matter is it was a bit hard to do it simultaneously, both in Hebrew and in English. But here we are tonight, just in English. For those of you who've got questions who want to ask me things about the upcoming elections, I'm here to try and answer. There are a few questions which already came in before we even started, people who sent them by WhatsApp or people who sent them through Facebook. So one of the questions was, am I not fed up after 3 terms being the mayor of Efrat? Isn't it time to move on? So the truth of the matter needs to be said that when I ran first time for being mayor back in 2008, the 2 previous mayors before me, each one of them served for 4 years. And as a resident in Efrat, it was obvious for me that being a mayor just 1 term was a bit too short. You didn't really get enough time to do things you wanted and planned to do. So the best thing would do is to try and get elected for at least 2 terms. And in 2008, that is basically what I said during my campaign, that I'm running for at least 2 terms. I still remember actually a few Americans who doubted the fact I'll complete 1 term. I would love to bump into them in the road these days and say, hey, I'm running out for my 4th term. You remember? You didn't believe I'll do 4 years. But we'll leave that aside. The first term was amazing. I learned a lot. And the second term, we really accomplished a lot of the things that we had originally planned in the first term. And one of the major things we succeeded doing in the first term was promote building permits. And in 2013 up to 2018, the city literally grew up by 60%. We got building permits to build in the Tamar, in the Dagan, a bit in the Zayt, and the sense of accomplishment, seeing all this new building happening all over Efrat, was really overwhelming, with a lot of satisfaction. But there was one thing missing. We finished all the infrastructure, we finished all the housing, we finished the schools, the kindergartens, but the residents didn't come yet. So in 2018, it was really like a natural move to carry on for another term, just in order to see who the residents were, those who were coming to inhabit these new houses that were just put up in the Tamar and the Dagan. The third term, there were a lot of plans. I can't say that the plans didn't come into fruition, but I can say that the third term definitely didn't look anything like we had anticipated it would look in the year 2018 when I was elected. This term, we had quite a big chunk of time of it. We had COVID, which turned the world upside down, turned the Efrat upside down. There were definitely many challenges that happened that we had to address, and that it was the first time that we had to deal with them. We wrote protocols in Efrat as to how to tackle COVID, and the Ministry of Interior took those protocols and basically sent them as a recommendation for all the towns and cities in Israel to copy and adopt the protocols that we have adopted and wrote down in Efrat. And we had two very horrific terror attacks. One of them where Lucy D and her daughters were murdered. One of them where Batsheva Nigri, a kindergarten teacher, was murdered the day before the school year opened. And again, I felt and was proud of the community that I was leading in Efrat, and it was definitely a source of a lot of empowering as to how much the city, which I have the honor of being the mayor, was acting in these crises. And then basically I made the decision that I was going to run for a fourth term, having realized that the third term was really the most difficult one, the most challenging one, but also the most rewarding and the most satisfying one. And before the elections took place, as you all know, the 7th of October, there was the attack on the southern border with all its brutality and casualties and people killed and fallen in battle. And it just added another burden on top of the sense of how lucky we are to live in Efrat. And that is basically just added to the satisfaction that I felt when I decided to run for a fourth term. This fourth term hits us in a crucial time, both in Israel and also in Efrat. We're facing challenges of people that were in battle, people that were absent from their houses for a very long period of time, and it definitely has its impact in different levels. But on top of all that, during the last few months, since the 7th of October, we raised a donation of $2.5 million to provide and improve the security service that we have here in Efrat. And bearing in mind that all this is now in the process of being installed, I would say that the first challenge for the next 5 years is to make sure that the security system of Efrat makes the jump that we want it to happen, to be even more prepared for in case of a crisis or another severe attack like we suffered in the south, and we all hope it won't happen, but we need to be prepared for the worst of all. The second challenge that we have has to do with education. We have an amazing educational system, a city that has won the award of excellency for the best educational system, the national award of the Ministry of Education. We won it twice in the last decade. There aren't many cities that can show that credit of winning twice the award of excellency in the education by the Ministry of Education, and we're proud to have done so. It doesn't mean that there aren't things that we need to improve in the educational system. We have an unbalanced educational system where not all the schools start at the same age, not all of them finish at the same age, which causes us to have kids maneuvering in between the different schools at different times, and it doesn't add anything to the stability of the schools and the stability of the kids. So we need to try and figure out how do we draw some sort of common denominator between all the different schools, bearing in mind that different parents are happy with what they have in their schools, And on the other hand, we have kids, or parents more accurately, that are bothered the fact that the school that they go to, especially in the Tamar and the Dagan, doesn't always carry to 7th grade and 8th grade, and then the kids have to move once again. So it's definitely something that we have to bear in mind, and we have to challenge and deal with. The third thing is, as you all know, we're in the process of opening the sports center, and whilst completing it, we've already raised funds specifically from the Ministry of Interior to expand both the gym, both the fitness center, and also build a third pool, which will be a hydrotherapy pool. These funds came because the Ministry of Interior saw the financial plans of the sports center, realized that it was something that could generate an income for the city of Efrat, and they want to encourage us carrying on, expanding it, and making it even better and more appropriate for the residents of Efrat. We have an industrial area that we're definitely pushing forward to be completed, which will create more working places and will generate an extra income for the council. And probably one of the biggest challenges amongst the first 5 is the building which is planned to take place hopefully very shortly in Efrat. We have 700 units which are literally waiting to be marketed by the government opposite Lower Pitum Aktoret, and another 400 units, what's called sheltered housing for the senior citizens. That's altogether 1,100 units. That whole area will be surrounded with enormous sports fields, green areas. We're going to build there another matnas, another 2 schools, and over 10 kindergartens. So I think the plate is quite full for the next term for things to do and achieve. And bearing in mind the situation in the country, bearing in mind the extent of the challenge of these 5 top challenges for the next 5 years, I definitely think that the person who needs to lead the city is an experienced mayor, somebody who knows to carry on from the day after the elections, come back to work without having to have a period of learning the job, starting to get to know the different ins and outs and the different people involved, and can just carry on from where we are at the moment. There is a question that was raised about, how shall I call it, completely chaos of illegal building around Efrat. So I don't know if that's the right description of complete chaos, and I don't know if it's all around Efrat. There's definitely one area which is extremely troubling us, just underneath the Dagan. And here it's fascinating to see something in a historical retrospective view of the founders of the city. The founders of the city had a vision of building a city which is not surrounded by a fence. This was not my vision, this was not my plan, this was not my desire. It was something done by those who built the city over 40 years ago. When you ask them why did they do that, they had 2 reasons. The first reason was, they said, when you sing the national anthem to be a free nation in our homeland, you definitely don't want to be surrounded by fences. And that was their first initial reason. The second reason was a more tactical and strategic view, saying that when you create a line, when you build a border, it definitely marks the land which belongs to you, but it also gives an indication from the people coming from outside up to where can they do what they wanted to do. For the first 30, 35 years of Efrat, we didn't have any issues of illegal building done by Arabs in the outskirts of Efrat. The first time we see that happening is underneath the Dagan. What happened there? Because of the topography of the neighborhood, the Ministry of Housing needed to build a retaining wall to support all the building. It doesn't mark the border of Efrat, it doesn't mark the jurisdiction of Efrat. But the Arabs, seeing that line, interpreted it as something that they can build up to that line. And that's where we really did start seeing a lot of illegal building happening by those Arabs. We don't have the power, we don't have the legal power to deal with that. What we do have to do is to report it to the civil administration and make sure that they enforce the law against them. Unfortunately, that is true, that in the past few years, we've had quite a few ministers of defense declaring that they're going to deal with it, they're going to demolish all of these houses, and as time went by, the situation just deteriorated and went from worse to even worse. We as a council can show on record the amount of complaints that we have filed by the civil administration, and we're probably one of the highest councils in Judea and Samaria reporting the amount of illegal violations happening around our outskirts. Not because there are that many, but because we're so persistent in recording and reporting. A few weeks ago, we were actually successful where we saw that one of these complaints came to fruition and a building was demolished. At the same day, there was another building that was supposed to be demolished, a building that is 5 stories high, a building that has been built for quite a long period of time, a building that went through the court system for quite a long period of time. Finally, the war that broke after the 7th of October was the justification of a declaration signed by the commander of the Etzion troops saying that that building is a safety hazard. The judge, seeing his declaration, allowed for the building to be destroyed, but an appeal was drawn. Luckily enough, the appeal was heard quickly, and the judge in the appeal dismissed the appeal, allowing the civil administration to demolish the house. The house was actually supposed to be demolished 2 weeks ago, but there was some VIP visitor from the United States that the government didn't want to shake the boat, to rock the boat so much, so the demolition was postponed. I'm being promised that we call it the Armon, the mansion, will be destroyed before the elections. We'll have to wait and see if that happens or not. But what I can guarantee you is that there is no illegal building happening in Efrat which we do not report, we do not run after the civil administration to make sure that they enforce the law and demolish it because that building was built on land which is not belonging to those individuals and definitely without any building permits or any building plans. Khani is asking, is it true that the rumor that Arabs will carry on cleaning the schools in Asechai? So I don't know what you mean by will continue. At the moment, one of our biggest challenges is finding cleaners to clean the schools. When I have guests these days who come from abroad, I'm telling them that one of our biggest threats on the city is the hygiene in the schools. We're almost 5 months since the 7th of October. The biggest challenge is to find workers for these jobs who are not Arabs. We've doubled what we're offering to pay these workers, and we're not succeeding in finding these workers. This is not a problem just for the city of Efrat. This is a problem all over the country, and we see that in some fields it is even more severe, like for example building, where there's a shortage of 150,000 workers for the building industry. So these questions are really at the moment on the table of the government. They need to decide how are we going to bridge between the lack of workers and the definitely need for these workers. We're doing everything in our power to try and find workers that both the kids and the parents will feel safe and will be safe, and it's definitely one of the challenges that we are dealing with and trying to resolve. And the same thing is the follow-up question of somebody asking about public transportation. These are professions that in the last years have become solely occupied by Arabs. We can be honest with ourselves. I personally don't know any Jewish mother who says that she wants her son to become a cleaner of a school. And we have definitely some professions in Israel that have been taken over by Arabs, and bus drivers is definitely one of them. The Israeli government is trying to find non-Arabs to drive buses. It's been already for at least 2 years since we had Shomer HaChomot, when that issue really arose, that they were missing bus drivers to drive the soldiers into their bases. So I don't know to tell you that I have the solution as who is going to drive the buses, but that is definitely something which I know the Minister of Transport is trying to resolve and deal with, and it's definitely something which, as we don't employ any bus drivers, we're not dealing with. I'm asked a completely different question about the senior citizens and the fact that people are afraid that they will move to Jerusalem. So as a mayor for 15 years, I can definitely say that in the first 5 years, there were quite a few senior citizens who said to me, Oded, we've retired and we are going to move to Jerusalem. In the last few years, we're seeing something completely different. We're seeing more and more senior citizens actually moving to Efrat for two main reasons. The first reason, to be honest, is because they want to come and live next to their grandchildren and next to their children. But the second thing is that they've started realizing that there are so many new programs which have opened up in Efrat for the senior citizens that they're interested in coming and taking part in these activities. We've got Merkaz Scheinfeld, which wasn't here 15 years ago, and is busy around the clock with different activities for the senior citizens. One of its most popular activities was during the summer holiday, meetings between grandchildren and grandparents. Excuse me, it's true that now Scheinfeld is occupied by the soldiers who came to look after us, but the plan is definitely to move back with the activity to Scheinfeld, and at the moment it's taking place in the Matnas. We were the first city in Israel to open a senior citizens class. The late Minister Uri Orbach was the one behind this initiative. We were one of the first 3 cities to actually accept the challenge and open here the senior citizens class, and it was a great success. In no time, there was a demand for an English speakers senior citizen class, and now we have a 3rd class which is more into religious studies, and we have a waiting list already to open a 4th class. This is on top of all the other activities that take place in Merkaz Vatikim and the special club that we've built in the Rimon for those who need even more special assistance. We have another fund coming from the Social Security to expand that club. So on the whole, there are quite a lot of activities happening here in Efrat, and what I see at the moment is more senior citizens moving into Efrat rather than what was in the past, that they were moving out. Judith is asking what can be done about the garbage that's being piled up between the northern entrance and Route 60. So basically, once in a while we do ask the civil administration to make sure that they clean up there, because it's out of Efrat's boundaries. We're not supposed to clean there. It is part of the jobs that the civil administration takes upon itself. So if you see that things are getting out of control, you can always drop me a line, especially if I get re-elected on the 27th of February. I'll be more than happy to deal with it. From time to time, we notice and we draw the attention of the civil administration, but I don't mind receiving reminders from you, and then we'll deal with it as well. Will there be, Roxanne is asking, will there be apartments for young families? So here again, when they started the building in 2013 in the Zayt, there were definitely apartments under the project of Mechir LaMishtaken, which was the cheap housing for young couples back then. About 2-3 months ago, there was marketing of more units in the Tamar. Some of them are under the title today, which is called Mechir Matara, which that's the program for young couples who want cheaper housing. And we were already promised by the government that also the next part that will be marketed will have that specific portion of apartments under the title of Mechir Matara. So we're definitely trying to do things in order for property prices will go lower. But I have to admit, the fact that the demand here is so high, and so many people want to move to Efrat is raising the demand way beyond the pace of building and availability, and that is the major reason why property prices are rising in Efrat. I had at the beginning of this week a parliament meeting in the Dagan with many new Olim, and I came back home feeling quite upset that I wasn't able to be more helpful for all these new Olim families that want cheaper housing in Efrat. But you do have to understand that when a city is successful, when a city provides services, and I'm not saying that about myself, I'm saying that because that's the indication where property prices go up, that's the indication that people want to live in the city, and the reason that they want to live here is because it's a good place to live in. So Stephanie is really asking again about public transportation bus drivers. So Stephanie, you have to remember two things. Number one is we don't employ them. They're being employed by national companies. National companies, unlike private companies, because these are public companies, they are not allowed to discriminate and say that they will only accept non-Arabs as bus drivers. And I guess that even if they would have said that, and even if they would have been able to say so, they would have had a problem finding non-Arab bus drivers, because at the moment, the vast majority of bus drivers in Israel are actually Arabs. So somebody saw a movie today which says, breaking news, for those of you who didn't know and didn't hear up until today, we in Efrat don't have a high school for girls. So I was quite surprised to hear about that video. I don't usually comment about things or statements of people who are running against me for office, but as it's coming as a question to me, so I'm more than honored to answer it on this platform. Traditionally, for historical reasons and nothing beyond that, there was a separation between the boys' school and the girls' school. It was accepted that the boys' schools will be in Efrat, and that's why Neve Shmuel was being built in Efrat, Derech Havot was being built in Efrat, and the mirror schools for girls were built in Gush Etzion. When I was elected in 2008, believe it or not, one of the major topics of discussion for the campaign was the fact that girls who reached 8th grade didn't have enough space in any of the high schools that were available at that time for the girls. And after I was elected, promising that I would solve that issue, we joined forces with the Gush Etzion Regional Council, and we built Ulpenat Oriya. We're full partners in the Ulpena with the Regional Council of Gush Etzion and with Or Torah Stone, and we're extremely proud of that school and what's become of it. Today, we also have introduced a round table, which has taken place already for quite a few years, but basically no girl who finishes 8th grade will get a negative answer from all the schools around. We guarantee that each girl will get at least one positive answer to one of the schools in this region. And the location, the fact that it's in Gush Etzion and not in Efrat, has nothing to do with the fact whether we have it or not. We're full partners in that school. Today, I don't know of a problem like I had in 2008, where girls don't have where to go. It is true that as both cities or both municipalities are growing larger, there is a demand for more schools. And when we'll have enough girls to start establishing a new Ulpena for girls, we'll definitely set a new one also in Efrat, which will be closer to the people who live here. But as far as I know, and as a father to two girls, the girls are quite happy with the availability of Ulpenat Neve Chana, Ulpenat Oriya, and Ulpenat Rosh Tzurim, and some go to Kiryat Arba. But there are enough options locally that there is no justification to build a new school just because somebody realized today in a movie, we don't have an Ulpena in Efrat. In order to build a school, you have to show that there are students who don't have where to go, and that's when the Ministry of Education will fund such a project, and that's not the situation at the moment. So Yudit has a question about garbage being burned outside Neve Daniel. I have to admit, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. We do have incidents of Arabs burning garbage in unofficial places. It is something that happens in the distance out of Efrat. The smoke and the pollution definitely comes here. In the civil administration, there is a person who is in charge of the environment. He's the equivalent of the Ministry of Environment in the Israeli government. He has inspectors, he has fining ability, and he's the one who deals with it. So whenever we do have an incident of smoke, of people burning garbage, we have a WhatsApp group of people who are more minded to the cause, and they report directly to us. We make sure that these people are caught and being fined and penalized for what they're doing. On the whole, I can say that comparing the situation here to what our friends in Binyamin and Shomron are suffering from, their burning of garbage is happening way more frequently and in much bigger amounts. So we're relatively here under control, but definitely whenever you see such an incident, we'll be more than happy to address it. What is my plan for the youth who hang around in the shopping mall or in the parks? So first of all, the youth is our youth. These kids have families, these kids have parents, and before the council needs to look after them, they also have their families. When I was elected in 2008, the situation with the youth was extremely worse than what it is today. Most of them were disconnected to any youth groups. Most of them were hanging out in different places. We had a permanent representation in Retorno, which is a special facility for kids who are addicted to drugs and need to be treated and basically healed from their addiction. And one of the promises I did back then was to deal with the youth. And we built Mate Noar, the youth center, and we made a big effort to empower the youth groups. We completed the sniff of Ezra in the Dekel, which wasn't operating then. We built a new sniff for Bnei Akiva in the Zayt. We brought a new youth group, Religious Scouts. We built another sniff for Bnei Akiva in the Tamar and the Dagan. And now we're in the process of starting to build a sniff for the kids from Ezra Tzafon, because the neighborhoods became so far away that there's another need for another sniff. We are proud to say that over 75% of the youth in Efrat are actually connected to youth groups. Those who are not connected to the youth groups, we have special clubs, we have special counselors, and we have programs for those who don't want to go to a youth group, but rather to go to something which their council does organize. So, if you are reporting about this youth in these two different places, I'll definitely re-look into it, but I think on the whole, we should be very proud of our youth, and we should definitely try and see how we make them in touch with the different programs that we have for our youth. Yudis is asking about the rumor that there was going to build a new facility for burning garbage. As far as I know, that rumor has been put in a standstill. I don't know if anybody who's promoting it. We did have one meeting with the Gush Etzion Regional Council, or maybe even two meetings, to try and understand what was planned, how can we combat it, or how can we join forces, making sure that it won't become a disturbance and a polluting facility. But at the moment, Yudis, I don't know anything happening with it. There were enough objections put out in order to try and stop it. And if there will be anything on the table regarding that issue, we'll definitely make people aware of it, and we'll definitely try and see what can be done and how can we make sure that our quality of life and quality of air doesn't get destroyed or worsened. So Hillary, as somebody who lives in the Te'ena, has a suggestion of having a shuttle inside Efrat. So that is also something we tried in the past. We had a 44 bus, which was a shuttle basically driving within Efrat. I managed to convince the Minister of Transport to introduce that line for Efrat. It involved subsidizing by the government. And after, I think it was a year or year and a half of trial, where they went on the bus and counted how many people actually used the bus, I was a bit embarrassed to see the figures, and basically they cancelled that line. Today we have two lines coming into Efrat, which one of them does a detour throughout all the neighborhoods, and one of them drives directly to Efrat. And the idea was that the one who goes through the different neighborhoods will basically collect all the people and will feed the express bus driving into Jerusalem. The more people will live in Efrat, the more potential there will be for such a shuttle, which will be just internal, and we're definitely following it all the time. But I want you to remember one important figure. In the last 5 years, we've doubled by 2 the amount of buses that come into Efrat and provide public transportation. That is a massive increase, and that is definitely something that makes life easier for people who want to commute by public buses. It's true that because of the roadworks, the buses have a problem being punctual and being on time, but also with that, there is all the time improvement. We're following up on it. We're reporting buses which don't show up, and I hope that when the roadworks will be completed, the timetable will be more reliable. So let me have a sip of water. The 7th of October, what are we doing? So I thought I mentioned it in the beginning, but because it is such an important topic, I don't mind repeating the answer. Obviously, the 7th of October attack was something severe, something unfamiliar from the past, by its brutality, by the amount of casualties, by the mechanism that was carried out, and it definitely made at least us in Efrat to go examine, learn, and try and find out what needs to be improved, what are we doing well, and what can we improve. So for example, I walk around with this radio system. It's a system that we bought for Efrat, which was specially designed for Efrat about a year and a half ago. And it is so unique because it doesn't rely on a solar service. Because we understood that in case of a shutdown of all the solar services, we still want to have radio contact with our security forces, with our first response team. So we basically designed a machine that's especially for us. And one of the lessons that they said in the towns around the Gaza Strip was that they didn't have any communication because solar went down. If they would have had radio systems like we had, that could have improved it. On the 6th of October, we had in Efrat 64 cameras. We're now in the process of installing more cameras, which will bring us up to 400 cameras. These cameras are being put in a very specific mannerism to provide a backup. So we won't be surprised like they were surprised in the south, that we'll be able to have ability of our eyes being able to alert us if a threat is coming towards the city. Some of these cameras have an ability to observe to long distances. I'm specifically not giving all these facts and figures because we don't like to expose all these details. If you feel you want to know more about the security system, so after the elections, please God, I will get elected, give me a call and we'll give you a tour of the security headquarters like we did for kids, like we did for families during the last few months, to show them how do we actually protect Efrat. These cameras are not all being put in obvious places, again to learn from the faults that were in the southern border. They're also not connected in the same mechanism like they were connected in the southern border, to enable us that we'll be able to have control even if one camera gets shut down, 2 cameras get shut down, each camera is completely individual, and there's no central command that if you overtake that central command, we become blind. On top of that, we've bought weapons which we handed out. On top of that, the first response team, which up until the 6th of October had 64 combat soldiers, is going to be multiplied into 130 soldiers. All these soldiers, or all these volunteers, will have this radio system, will have a helmet, will have a vest, a bulletproof vest, and will have a gun on them 24/7. That's why when we do have an indication of one of the cameras noticing something happening around Efrat, the first response team is always the first to respond. They always catch the suspicious people who want to come towards the city of Efrat, and we hand them over to the police and the army, who come way later after we've already caught the people. We're now inquiring to buy a new device, which there's no city in Israel has that device yet. It will provide us some air coverage and protection, which I again don't want to elaborate too much, but if we'll be able to purchase that, that will enable us to provide another layer of protection that other cities in Israel don't have. On the whole, Efrat has a very good security system, and now we're even making it even stronger and even better, and please God, we won't be trialed to see how good this first response team is, or how good our security forces are. In the Itam, we have permanent people who live there. They are living there with a permit from the Ministry of Defense, and they are allowed to live there, which is something extremely different than a lot of the outposts that we have around in Judea and Samaria. We wanted to make sure that when we take public money, or when we take donations to be invested there, it's not money that's going to be thrown down the drain. It's an investment that we know is going to benefit the people of Efrat. On the Itam, the Ministry of Housing is currently working on building permits for 3,500 units. It's not as developed as the plans opposite Lower Pitum Aktoret, so it's still in the drawing table, it's still in the different versions of drafts. I think, if I recall correctly, we're already on draft number 47, but the government has invested already tens of millions of shekels in the planning, and we're definitely hoping that they will complete the planning soon, and then we'll be able to start seeing actual building happening there. Why is there no shmirah of residents? So this takes us back, I think, over 20 years, maybe even more, 25 years ago, when it was made the decision that people will pay a agrat shmirah instead of being put in different slots of security. There were many faults with residents doing shmirah. They didn't show up, they were late, they weren't as trained as the ones that we have today. Today, the people who do the shmirah around the city are trained regularly, are trained with their weapons, know how to talk on the radio, know the city off by heart. In case they need to get somewhere quickly, they know how to do it. And that's basically where we are at the moment regarding shmirah. I think what we get for what we pay is much better than what was before that system was incorporated. So again, I don't know who is asking why am I running for a fourth term. I thought I answered that at the beginning, and I'm afraid that if I have to repeat that answer, people might be bored and will leave me in the middle of this question and answer. So what I suggest for the person who asked that, I'm not tired, I can answer you again the same question, but if at the end of this session you'll just go into the beginning, you'll receive a very detailed answer as to why I'm running for a fourth term, and why I think it is a smart move for the people of Efrat to vote for me for a fourth term. The amount of time that it will take a new mayor to start studying and learning all the ins and outs of what needs to be done tomorrow, there's no learning time, especially in times where security issues are at the level they are, especially at the challenges that we have in Efrat, which I also listed at the beginning of this session. So just at the end, if you don't find the answer, drop me a line and I'll privately answer you, or I'll just tell you exactly at which minutes I said which answer, and you'll find the full answer to this question. If there are volunteers who want to take part in Shmirah, we're always happy to have volunteers taking part. We are extremely appreciative of over 300 volunteers who were patrolling the city since the 7th of October. We realize that we need more patrol cars. We realize that we won't have enough money to pay the people who actually do these shifts. And we had over 300 volunteers working 24/7, driving 8 cars, patrolling the city day and night. Definitely improves the level of security for the people of Efrat. And if there are people who want to carry on volunteering, just drop a line to the security department, and we're always happy with more hands volunteering. Again, the issue of cameras and Arabs in Efrat. So let me just clarify. There are different Arabs with different statuses. There are Arabs who are Israeli Arabs, which we have absolutely no legal ability to stop them at the gates, and they're entitled to come at any given time to do in Efrat if they want shopping or even if they want to buy a property. There's no legal mechanism to stop them from actually doing it. Regarding Arabs from Judea and Samaria, at the moment they're not coming in. As I said again, it's a question which hasn't been determined yet by the government. When there will be new guidelines which will be updated about, then we'll definitely examine them, see if they provide a sufficient answer to the new reality that's trying to be created, and we'll discuss it then when these things actually come into place. So with me is Yuda, who used to be my mankal, and I greatly miss him, so I just recruited him on reserve duty to come and help me with the questions that I don't manage to see because they're coming in so quickly. But somebody asked, what is my message these days to the Israeli public? I think we all went through a big trauma on the 7th of October. But I think as big as the trauma was, I think the response of the individuals, the Israeli society, the pace in which that response came, gave us all a very warm feeling of a united, strong community of the whole of Israel, Shel Klal Am Yisrael. And as time goes by and different political issues come up and different questions come up, it is very easy to see how the split, how the dispute, how the separation is starting to grow again. And I wouldn't like to say that we need an outside enemy to unite us. I think we have enough challenges that we need to remember that if we are united, we can stand against them, and if we're divided, we'll fall because of them. And saying being united doesn't just mean that I want to be united. I want to get along with other people. Being united means that you're willing to go a step towards people that you disagree with them, people that think differently from you. And I think if each one of us would take that one step towards somebody that he completely disagrees with, would have a much stronger society in Israel. And I think that is what we need to try, all of us, to strive through, and in order to reach that unity. I'm starting to lose my voice. I've still got 5 days before the election, so I think we'll cut it over here. But before I say to you a good night and Shabbat Shalom, I've got 2 requests. Request number 1 is, on Tuesday, the 27th of February, Adar Aleph, please put on the red note my name, Oded Revivi. I think I've proven in the last 15 years that I know what I'm doing running this city, both on regular days, but also during crisis. And because this is a period of many challenges, I don't think it's a time to take experiments, try and change leadership. I suggest we stick with what we know. The second request is, there's another sign. I have to get the directions right. Please put the letter Lamed. We have here an unprecedented situation where there's 7 lists running for a council of 11 seats. If all 7 lists will get into the council, it would look worse than an Israeli government, and I'm not referring to any specific one because they're all just as bad. When you have so many parties forming a governing order, you have different individuals pulling into different directions. We already have different parties with different sectors that they want to represent. My party is representing all the neighborhoods of Efrat. My party is representing all the age groups of Efrat. My party is representing all the types of different people who live in Efrat, whether they're people who made Aliyah or people who were born in Israel, whether they're people who were brought in Efrat or people who moved into Efrat. If you vote for my party, you'll get both that representation that you're looking for, but also a governing party that knows how to lead. I'm proud to say that the people on my list don't want to leave. They want to carry on servicing the people of Efrat. Some of the lists running changed, people moved out, people moved in. That's not the situation in my list. These are people who in the last 5 years, some of them in the last 10 years, some of them in the last 15 years, devoted a lot of time for the residents of Efrat, for the well-being of the residents of Efrat, and therefore please vote with 2 slips, Oded Revivi and Lamed, on Tuesday, the 27th of February, Chai Adar Aleph. Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom, and I'll meet you at the ballot. Thank you.